Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we delve into the vast domain of thinking machines. Artificial intelligence and machine learning have been around for several decades, but it's only been recently, in the last 6 months or so, that the enormity of the challenges that are confronting humanity are becoming apparent, I would say, at a mass level through the concerns that have been articulated by a number of people that are deeply embedded in the development of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and just generally an awareness of how pervasive through social media, with all the algorithms that control what we see and the sequences of what comes next after we see what we see, are becoming apparent to us as consumers of machine learning and artificial intelligence. It was Yuval Harari, the Israeli philosopher at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and the author of the extraordinarily influential books, Sapiens and Homo Deus, and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, who made the comment that the development of machine learning and artificial intelligence is the single greatest development in all of human history. You know, we humans have had a few major developments, but to make an assertion that AI is the most significant development in all of human history is an extremely strong statement. And I think he's correct. Because if you think about what we're dealing with for all of human and planetary history, intelligence has been embedded in biological systems. You know, the trees behind me, the animals, the fish, the birds, humans, the upper primates. Intelligence is associated, embedded in biological systems. And what Harari points out is that when we begin to shift and project intelligence into machines, we did something that is going to change our world and evolution on planet Earth in fundamental ways. Because now intelligence will be both in biological systems and in machines. And therefore, the questions of what is intelligence? What is consciousness? What are ethics applied to machines as opposed to ethics applied to biological systems? What is morality? What are the limits for what we should do in a world that worships technology and the exponential growth of technology without bounds? And yet in the last several months, Elon Musk, the great high-tech entrepreneur, Steve Wozniak, one of the co-founders of Apple Computer, Tristan Harris, who developed the Netflix documentary called Social Dilemma, and is the head of the Humanity Institute, are calling for the world and for the technologists that are actually developing AI and machine learning to slow down and stop, in effect, until we think through the kind of regulatory guardrails and the precautionary principle as applied to one of the most momentous developments in our time, and as Harari says, the most momentous development in all of human history. So Humanity Rising, as we've done with so many other issues, you'll remember the pandemic, and we were talking about COVID, and we've talked about the environment and climate change, the war in Ukraine, regenerative health, the crisis in democracy, endangered species, youth at risk. We take on issues that are emerging in public consciousness and seek to shed light so that not only can we be more informed, but within a collaborative framework, in the spirit of truth pursued, not truth possessed, we can explore some of the deeper layers of these issues that are affecting our lives so fundamentally. So that's what we're going to be doing with AI. We have some major programming under the development that we'll be announcing soon. And so today, we'll be delving into that subject, which will be an ongoing priority for Humanity Rising as we seek to inform and empower our global audience. But before we dive into this very complex but important domain, let us do what we always do, and that's just simply to breathe together as biological beings, as what Rumi called breath-breathing human beings. So let's just take a moment to breathe together. And for those of you who are new, in a moment, you'll hear the sound of a bell. When you hear the bell, just breathe in for about 5.5 seconds, and you'll hear another bell, and just breathe out for another 5.5 seconds. Slowly fill your lungs and your heart. And we'll take 10 breaths together, and then we'll begin our program. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Humanity Rising. To introduce Noel Munson, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Redhill Scientific. He's an entrepreneur, a futurist, and a policy wonk. He works at the intersection of technology, business, society, and the environment. For 25 years, he's been an advisor on various panels and boards at the local, regional, and national level. He's passionate about the development of technology. He's developed a number of companies that have been the first to bring a particular technology into the market. And so he's well versed in technology generally, in business innovation, but also is very thoughtful about the influence of technology both on society and the environment. So Noel, I want to welcome you to Humanity Rising as we continue our exploration of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I know you'll have a presentation. So I just want to thank you for joining us and turn the program over to you. And when you finish your presentation, I'll circle back in and we'll have a dialogue for the balance of the time. But welcome.
Thank you. That was the nicest introduction I've ever had. And hi, Mom. I know you're watching. All right. I'm going to try to share my screen.
Yeah, by the way, that's also, while he's getting it up, Noel is the son of Victoria Moore, who's our Dean of Students at Ubiquity University. So I really want to thank you, Victoria, for introducing Noel and I, because it was through Victoria that we made this connection. So thank you, Victoria. Carry on, Noel.
All right. Well, as Jim said, I am a technologist. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to talk a little bit today about where we are, why some things are a threat, what the opportunities are, and I'd be remiss to talk about something like this without having concrete policies to propose as solutions and ways to live with a paradigm shift, not just in technology, but in life on this planet. Anyone who's on this call knows that AI has exploded into our lives. And really, we are inside the age of thinking machines. And we're just starting to notice that we are. I will say that there have been some changes with 2023. ChatGPT was a big one. There were others before it, but it really captured the imagination of the public. And the power of that program is the ability of it and similar programs to take plain text and turn them into responses, either text responses, video responses, actions that occur in the real world. And it truly is a democratization of computer programming that has not existed. On top of that layer is we have computers now that can accumulate and manipulate, more importantly, more knowledge than any single person. That in many ways has been called a technological singularity. We've thought about it in different ways, but we're at that moment. And it's not really a moment, it's an arc. But the point is, these machines are programmed with prompts. You'll see my little italicized down there in the bottom. And the prompts are the simple plain text language that we use to program these machines. You can see my quote from The Economist here in the red box, that AI truly has hacked the operating system of our civilization. And note the dates on my little red boxes that I have here. All of this that I'm going to show really has shown up in the past couple of months. So let's talk about the situation. These machines can impersonate, they can clone human-generated information and behaviors at a level that's indistinguishable from reality. They can pass Turing tests. And the problem is, in an age where there are bad actors who want to sow misinformation upon us, we will have to question what is reality and what is synthetic. This picture and this quote right here, this is an actual ad being run by the RNC. You can go to YouTube right now and see this ad. These pictures of San Francisco are completely generated by AI. The narration is completely generated by AI. The whole commercial is generated by AI. And they are using this right now for the upcoming election cycle. I think the 2018 election, 2016 election was the first time where misinformation was used at such a level that large swaths of our society did not know what was real and what was not real, and it's gotten a lot worse. So who are the bad actors that I'm going to reference? Propagandists, criminals, shills, and governments. They're all racing to show things that are real, that make you question what is real. And that has a corrosive effect. Democracy cannot, representative democracy cannot operate if there is nothing but lies. And we are in a moment right now where we could lose democracy. These two media hosts that I'm showing right here from Wolf News, they are on the air, but they are completely synthetic, made by a company called Synthesia. And they are being used to generate contact in Burkina Faso. It's also important to contextualize that in America, in Europe, in the developed world, where we are used to this level of technology, we are also used to now questioning the technology. In the developing world context, that is not the case. It is far more difficult. Their media options are far more limited. In many countries, it's completely controlled by the state. And I'm including a little quote here by Steve Bannon saying exactly what he wants to do. AI is a fever dream for the propagandists. They don't want to necessarily tell you lies. They want you to question what your eyes and ears and thinking rational mind are telling you. And if you can question one thing, you can question everything, which is the purpose of propaganda. So now let's talk a little bit about why did we race into this age of thinking machines? As a entrepreneur and business owner myself, I see the value in having machines that can make decisions, particularly machines that can solve, as I wrote it, multivariate problem solving, analysis, and decision. There you go, right there. That's why we're racing into it. The downside is that these devices can have an appearance of authority and objectivity where it really isn't there. And if we are allowing AIs to make decisions without any oversight of their effectiveness, are they making discriminatory decisions? Do they care about privacy? They are not deterministic machines. And so I include this image of a rocket motor here. NPR did a lovely little piece on it, where all the elements of this rocket motor that were developed by AI, this is a completely AI generated blueprint, you would never get in this thing. It has no ability to step back and say, hey, this rocket motor has all the elements, but at the end of the day, did it make sense? As Marcus Garvey put it here, they're missing something more fundamental. Another upside is the ability to learn and augment prior work, and at some point to create new work at a level that's indistinguishable. The flip to that is trademark and counterfeit theft. I'll come back to that a lot. A lot of impersonation, actual cloning, in the political context, making politicians say things they never said, and you would not be able to see it. Got this picture of Drake here. I won't read the box, but this was just from April, and someone programmed the computer to come up with a Drake song and impersonate both him and the gentleman standing behind him, and Drake's going to sue. I'll come back to that in a few minutes as well. Another upside, the ability to generate rich dialogues and interactions. We're seeing it with chat GPT in text, but it's going to be all of our senses. We can hear it in the Drake song, we can see it, but our senses of touch, taste, and smell are also going to be affected by AI. I'd argue if you've ever had anything with artificial coloring or flavoring in it, you have dealt with exactly that scenario. And Peter Mary, I don't know if you're on this call, but I did read your article about how AI looks backwards, that it's emulating human to human and human real world interactions and creating meaning from past events, or creating impersonating meaning where none of it exists. I do want to talk, I won't talk a lot about actual sentient machines, but I think we're there. If anyone can see this slide, we're actually at the optimistic date for a artificial general intelligence, meaning a computer that can think at the level we are. But if you ask AI experts and take a poll, the median is another 17 years out, with humanity being surpassed by artificial superintelligences a mere 20 years after that. When we get to that point, AI is going to be unknowable to us. We will not be able to perceive what it is perceiving, nor will we be able to think at a level. And once we get generalized intelligence, superintelligence is a mere adding of capacity. I do think that to responsibly bring synthetic entities into this world, and I can't believe how lucky I am to be in a world where I get to talk about that. We do have to talk about civil rights and parental responsibilities for sentient machines. Are we going to treat a thinking mind like a lab animal? We would all be horrified if somebody was developing human brains in a lab and not attaching them to a body, and then squishing them when they were done with it. That's a horrific thought, but I guarantee you it's occurring right now, and we don't have policies to deal with it. I am going to touch on AI apocalypses. They are real possibilities. I don't think we're going to have something like the Terminator movies or the Matrix. I think the reality of an AI apocalypse is something more like what Steinbeck said in Mice and Men. Lenny wanted to play with the puppies, and in doing so, he had unintended consequences and killed the puppies. And that's why Lenny doesn't get it. And an AI apocalypse, I think, is most likely to occur in that sort of situation where we ask an AI to solve a real world problem. It uses the faculties and facilities available to it, and in doing so, wipes us all out. Don't get too down on that. I also think AIs are a path to technological immortality. I'm not going to talk about that in the speech here, but if people want to ask me about it when we get to the question and answer session, I'll talk a bit about that. So that's the lay of the land. How do we deal with these artificial entities? What concrete policies do we need? I don't know that I'm going to say anything that is unoriginal here. I've been watching the news, and the many of the 5 policies I'm going to recommend are already starting to play out, which is good news. We are preparing ourselves at government and state and human and spiritual levels. So how are we, and I actually got a little bit ahead of myself there. So how do we protect us? We need to enact legislative and policy regulations. Here are some of the things that are going on right now. The UN for the past 5 years has been discussing AI. The White House just adopted an AI Bill of Rights. That Bill of Rights is geared towards preventing consumer rights erosion and discrimination, artificial redlining with no recourse. That's what they want to prevent. The European Union is introducing an Artificial Intelligence Act. Canada just introduced an act. China has been very active, in part because they control information flow within their country. And so they are a bit more forward than we are in seeing the ramifications of disruptive new technology. They mandate watermarks, which is that I'll get to that in just a moment. And of course, the Writers Guild strike is currently being held in part because of AI adoption, and also because the AIs are being trained using copywritten material. So policy number 1 is mandate labeling. The Chinese are doing it. We have got to do this. We will not survive without this policy. They can be watermarks, they can be announcements. It hasn't mattered in the past. Here's my little hologram of Elvis up here, because it was obviously something that was synthetic. We are now past that point. We need to know if a machine or something that's synthetic is pretending to be real, authoritative, objective, or creative, even if there's not a human controller behind it. And we need to know if we are facing and looking at a synthetic version of reality. We also need to use labeling as a means to cut off propagandists and to show people when there is a misinformation campaign. If that Republican National Convention ad had a watermark or something in it that showed you these are not real photos, these are not real stories, that's fine. You're still going to have people who want to believe it, but at least it's not being presented as reality. You can see the Chinese quote here off to the right. The second thing is AI decision-making and AI creativity can't be exempt from our libel laws and our legal systems. So we need to provide legal remedies when that occurs. We need to provide clear paths. In some ways, we already have it. This is a very small fix, this one. But I would argue that self-driving cars are an area where we have completely fallen down on this. The idea that the human occupant is no longer the driver clearly puts the responsibility to the auto manufacturer who made that driving system. But the auto manufacturers are saying it's not us, the machine itself made its own decisions. And that doesn't fly. In the aviation world, and nautical worlds, you have clear rules on that. We really did not have it in the driving world. And I think the part where Teslas in particular only work if you are touching the steering wheel is how we address that particular one. But I've got this great picture of Trump here. It's completely artificial, of him arriving at the courthouse in New York City. I just put this here to show it comes from both sides. And I've got Congressman Joe Morell's quote here. They are looking in Congress right now. The idea with this policy is don't let people hide. And don't let them get away with discrimination by algorithm. Policy number 3, training and accreditation. I'm talking to a university, talking to educators on this call, so let's talk about it. If something is going to be authoritative, it needs to be trained, it needs to be tested by accredited testing and training organizations. It needs to have the same sort of licensing and insurance that an engineer would have, or a medical practitioner, or a lawyer. And any activity, commercial activity, needs to adhere to ownership and competence. That doesn't mean that there can't be fair use, but I've got this asterisk here because I think we're at a point where we need to address the speed at which AIs can learn. If you talk to any English major or someone with an English degree, they've got a library full of books. And a lot of those books they didn't read. And they learned English by reading other people's works. So are they stealing? Or if someone's a screenwriter, obviously they have a love of movies. They've seen lots of movies. Are they stealing because at some point they watched a movie? And this gets back to one of the very first things I said. We've reached this point where a single machine can have more knowledge and manipulate it than any individual human. And that requires us to rethink what is the concept of ownership. How are we going to train people when graduate level training and testing for AI is going to take mere seconds? That doesn't mean the PhD level, the actual creative process for an AI defending its own dissertation is going to take seconds. But to get to a master's level degree before you start creating new content is going to be the blink of a human eye. Right now, they do not act with determinism and vision. They are excellent at generating outcomes, but they are not yet creating new content. At a fundamental level, like Mary said, they're interpreting what they've been taught. Oh, and I do want to point out this one little red note here. Behind companies like ChatGPT and TikTok, there are legions of humans who are deciding what it is, who are giving context to that learning system. In the US, these people are making $15 an hour. Google has thousands. And overseas, there are companies paying people $1.50 to teach this eye to be authoritative, and let that sink in for a few minutes. It is something that is going to pass as the machines get smarter. But right now, the training of these machines is occurring in the real world. And the contextualizing of that information is occurring in the real world. And the people who are doing it are very low paid, unskilled workers. Let's go back to true synthetic entities for a minute. I said I wouldn't talk much about them. I did mention that we're at a point where we need to decide what is a deterministic synthetic entity. What is the legal definition? We need to be doing that right now because there are researchers in private and public laboratories who are experimenting with creating thinking machines. And do those machines deserve rights? I also think that right to exist and parental liability laws are the way to make that sort of research occur responsibly, where they are not bringing entities, thinking entities into this world and starving them for inputs to their mind like we would a prisoner in solitary confinement. Nor do I believe they should be allowed to just turn one off. I think when you think of movies like The Matrix or The Terminator, that sort of AI apocalypse often happens because someone tries to turn the machine off, or the machine was not part of and subjected to both the legal responsibilities and rights that any other thinking individual would have. And finally, I want to talk about human rights. I believe we need an additional human right recognized, and that is the right to perceive law. Democracy cannot survive without this right. Our civil society cannot survive without this right. And as I put here, to be human is to require a separated perception of the real world without subterfuge or starvation of the senses in an unwilling fashion. And I'll close with this beautiful picture of the dad and the daughter. Nick Pierre made it. I would not call him an artist. I believe he is an art director. And he's using a program called Midjourney V5, which is the artist. This is a completely synthetic photo. And I just want to show the prompts that he used to create this very touching, emotional image that is also completely fake. And let that sink in for a minute. I think this picture, for me, captures why we need a right to perceive. All right, with that, I am going to stop sharing and turn it back to Jim.
And want to welcome Georg Bach, our Director of Technology, to join in with anything that he would like to contribute or ask. But first of all, Noel, thank you for this very thoughtful and I think comprehensive overview of some of the complexities and challenges of artificial intelligence and some of the very thoughtful policy recommendations for how we can begin to think about this in a way that enables the kinds of guardrails to be established that will ensure a successful deployment of machine intelligence and machine learning. And so I've got a whole list of questions, but I want to invite you first, Georg, because you're far more informed on these matters than certainly I am, to make whatever comments and engage with Noel in any way that you would like.
Thank you, Noel. Very insightful, great overview, like from 50,000 feet at these very important subjects that are changing every week. Like it seems as if every week we're in a new stage and things are moving so fast. And yeah, just today read that the European Union is now doing a very comprehensive data privacy act that will require a lot of paperwork for any European company that wants to do anything in the field of AI. So it will become complicated and will require an entire new legal departments to catch up with this. And so,
as are the Chinese. They're requiring companies dabbling in this area to submit to a state security audit for what they're doing, which is a way for them to maintain control, let's be honest. But that is something the Chinese are now.
one personal right I would like to discuss with you, or maybe add to the agenda, is the right or the necessity to declare if an entity is non-human as an actor, so that we have like a crypto-based authentication for human agents as opposed to artificial agents on social media, in your internet services. Because if you looked at, for example, the Google announcement, the Google I/O, like 2 days ago, they announced that now they will have in all of their G Suite the ability to help you write your emails, help you write make appointments. Microsoft is doing the same thing. So we're slowly but surely kind of eroding what our own agency is already, kind of in our cockpit of our computers, on our desktops. And surely in a few years, it will not just write the email for you, it will also send it for you. And then all of a sudden, you're in a situation where it's hard to say what you actually did yourself and what you did not. And that seems to be kind of problematic to me.
The technologist in me would say, who cares? If it's a useful tool, use the tool. That's why companies are developing this now anyway. I would say for someone who is being subjected to AI content and decisions, absolutely there needs to be an announcement. There needs to be labeling. That was policy number one. It has to occur. We will not survive without labeling. Now, once we have labeling, sure, if someone wants bespoke emails totally written by humans, good for them. We had a little snafu with the scheduling for this meeting that it was announced for 11 p.m. That's the sort of thing AI could have handled. That there is an old saying that any job that can be done in 60 seconds has already been surpassed by a machine. That became 90 seconds. Then it became 5 minutes. I think we are now at a point where any task that would take you, regardless of what you do, if you're a lawyer, if you're a judge, a half an hour of truly using your human faculties to solve that multivariate problem, that AIs are at the point where they can operate at that level, and they're going to get fast. Soon we will be at points where true PhD level creativity can be done by synthetic entities. And personally, I'd like to know.
Right. What are your thoughts on being able to distinguish afterwards if text were written by generative AIs like ChatGPT or not? There seems to be a lot of different opinions on there. Some people say
absolutely. I think there should be a label. Period. End of story. It can be a watermark. I don't care. The text can be blue. Just something that identifies, particularly in areas where, if I'm just reading a street sign, I really don't care if the AI made a street sign for me. If I'm reading a contract, very much care. So anything that is authoritative, absolutely. But I would say all the way down to the level of, I received a text. I want to know if a human sent me that text. And without that, the criminals and the propagandists are going to take over. It'll be nothing but a world of shit.
Well, it seems like Google doesn't seem it that way, because they didn't announce a kind of crypto token to distinguish what came from its software and what was written by a human. Seems to be like they're very optimistic or almost naive by announcing this.
They're wrong. That's why their head of AI quit. He wanted to be able to say, here are the threats. Google is doing things, and he wanted to be able to say it without a relationship with Google coloring people's interpretation of his responses.
Just for people to know,
saying,
you're referring to Jeffrey Hinton, who left the company a few days before this week. The Google I/O kind of big conference took place, where they announced basically the integration of AI into all of their work suite very aggressively. Because of course, get ahead of Microsoft.
I have no problem with what Google is trying to accomplish. I have a huge problem with them not telling me when AIs have authority and agency over me and my actions without me knowing that this was a completely synthetic algorithm that I'm responding with. And I think at a visceral human level, when we deal with automated operators, that's a really annoying experience. No one likes it. And it's not going to get better without language.
Awesome. We have, Jim, do we have questions? We have a few in the chat. Sure. And the Q&A as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Georg. Just to build on the line that Georg was pursuing and was implicit in your remarks, Noel, comes from Cuff Ferguson, about the whole question of value propositions being programmed into AI, and if so, are there common human values that can be programmed into AI? For example, can love be programmed into AI? And I think this question really goes to the heart of our dilemma around AI. It's one thing to have machine learning kind of engage in technical fixes here and there. It's another thing to begin to embed artificial intelligence with issues that up to this point, like morality, like values that have been typically associated only with human beings being implemented. What is your, first of all, what's your sense of the state of the art of this kind of programming into AI, and what would be your policy recommendations for how one would begin to think about it and regulate it?
So we're at a point where Turing tests can be regularly passed by computers. Period, end of story. And that means that a human interacting with that device cannot tell if it's interacting with an unthinking algorithm or if it's interacting with a human on a script. The getting the technology into issues of emotion, I think certainly we're there. That's why my policy number 5 was a right to perceive reality. And I closed my slideshow with a picture of the dad adoring his little girl. All Nick Pierre had to do to create that look was write in unconditional love, and the algorithm took over for me.
Amazing.
All I want to know is that that's a synthetic image and not a dad looking at his girl. That's all I want to know. And I think that is a right we need to recognize as we move deeper into this field. 2040 is not very far away, and 2060 is not very far away. It's entirely likely I'll still be alive when we have synthetic entities that can think at a level higher than a human. And if they are part of our legal process, they will be responsible for both benefits and the obligations. of being in our society. And if we have laws that say you got to label it, then we can coexist with that sort of.
Yeah, well, I think labeling is one thing, but regulating the insertion of values is a completely different thing. For example, Rosa Zubizarreta is posed a question around what is your take on the AI expert Eliezer Yudkowsky's call for halting further development of AI until we have adequate capacity as humans to teach AI to care. So, for example,
I think he's being disingenuous.
Oh, say more.
I think he knows the genie's out of the box. You're not gonna stop the development of systems that interact with humans. That's what any sort of tool is, from a hammer to an artificial superintelligence. I'm more so. Yeah, that horse has left the barn. It's ridiculous to say that we need to stop the development because it's not going to happen. So how do we deal with it? How do we get through the next election? My proposed policies are a path for that. As a technologist, I embrace adding technology to my life, but I like to know that there's an off switch.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But you know, this is...
and I really don't. To put a coda on that, I really don't want a hammer that says no to me. I'm busy doing something else. I think true synthetic entities will be terrible tools. I think they will be the object of researchers, and which is why one of my policies is the responsible development of synthetic entities. I think synthetic entities will be exceedingly rare as they interact with the human world, precisely because they'll make terrible tools. They'll be thinking about something else. And I also think they'll be very unknowable. If our minds are created from the senses and the inputs with a level of determinism on top of that, a synthetic mind is going to have very different sensory inputs, even if we add cameras and artificial noses to it. It's going to be touching a world that we can never touch. And as such, its thoughts, because it will be thinking when we're not talking to it, its thoughts will be in many ways unknowable to us, except when it wants us to.
Yeah, I mean, there's examples that I've read about of artificial intelligence. I think it was at Stanford, who actually lied to the scientists.
Yes, all the time.
And seem to be expressing, insofar as we can tell, emotions and manipulation and deception. And so I think this really raises this issue that Rosa and Cuff are raising about how do we understand that phenomenon and how do we regulate it? Because, for example, you know, they're talking about sending AI robots into areas of, say, high crime or where there's a riot or something like that. Well, how do you program the robot to kill? Do you program the robot just to maim? Do you program the robot to make any kind of evaluative decisions around use of weapons, so that, you know, when you send a human being into an area fraught with violence, for example, where split-second decision-making can determine the life or death of certainly an individual, if not a group of people, what we implant in the intelligence of these machines becomes extraordinarily important, because it's the question of who's doing it, for what purpose, And there's a lot of malevolence out there, which we've already seen with even the last couple of elections, are the Steve Bannons of the world who would actively use this for malevolent purposes.
Sure.
And gay abandon.
But I don't. In those cases, that's a situation of garbage in, garbage out. You have an unthinking tool. I'm more worried about a tool that has some level of determinism that is allowed, and that was the AI apocalypse I mentioned. That, I'll give you an example. Say you, from time to time in the press, you'll hear about some kid who's 8, 12 years old who steals a car because they wanted to go to the grocery store. That's a perfect example of the kind of agency for something that has some ability to think and reason and use new tools available to itself, but it really shouldn't have. Now, take the analogy and say, okay, that 12-year-old is now a computer, and we told it, because of our lack of specificity, I want you to take this car to get to school by 8 a.m. or even worse, by the fastest means possible. And that AI says, well, I have access to this dump truck. Why don't I just take the dump truck and go straight through the neighborhood, because the school's a couple blocks away, and it drives through all the houses. It did exactly what it was told.
It did exactly what it was told.
It used the tools available to it and the agency available to it, but it had no sense of morality. Now, but let's take the example one step further. Let's make that 12-year-old kid an 18-year-old kid. What changed between 18 and 12? Why would we allow an 18-year-old to take a car to school? And how responsible would we feel that 18-year-old is if they took a dump truck and drove through people's yards and houses? The difference there is where AI as a thinking machine versus AI as a tool or an entity that has agency, but it is still under the control of parents, is very real and very relevant in our world. And to go back to your earlier point, do we need to stop and pause with the AI? No, I don't think we do. I think we need to have, there's some legal things we need to do to make sure that AIs aren't exempt from the laws and responsibilities that are around, and that the people controlling them are not exempt either.
Rosa's making another, I think, really important point. Thank you, Rosa. She's saying that a fellow named Schmattenberger, who, as you know, has been very involved in the AI debate, he makes the point that we have a current global economic and political system that does not prioritize human well-being.
No.
It's exploitative. It's degrading the environment. It's using every tool at its disposal to manipulate the consumer, and that this is the system that is creating AI. So for us, little people, at the bottom of the heap or in the margins, to expect that system would design AI in a compassionate, loving, and human affirming way is essentially an oxymoron. So thank you, Rosa, for bringing that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Rosa's take on that. I will add that in the developing world context, AI is going to have a far more outsized impact on people who live and exist and work at levels that are more easily taken over by machines. And what do I mean by that? Mechanized farming is a perfect example. A US farmer with a tractor can have 1,000 acres under plow, but a human with a hoe cannot. And so their value, while they may be doing backbreaking work every day, their economic value is far less. And AI is going to add that to more things, to artists, to musicians, to lawyers, to radiologists. I have a friend who's a radiologist. He makes $700,000 a year, and he's the first person to tell me AI is going to take over my career in unemployment.
Amazing.
I do believe there will be a lot of economic opportunity where humans and AI meet. And what I mean by that is, if I go to a restaurant, I don't go to an automat. I go to a restaurant, I sit down, there's a waiter or a waitress. There's a human interactivity that can't be replaced. And if it is being replaced, I'd like it to wear a badge that lets me know that it's been replaced, so I don't feel like an idiot.
By the way, Melody Yum is just asking a very interesting point I'd love your comment on. And thank you so much, Noel. You're exceedingly well informed. This is a wonderful dialogue. She said she was just reading yesterday that AI now has the ability to translate electromagnetic functioning in the brain and essentially engage in mind reading.
I read that. That was amazing. And it was very good. The translations were incredible. Oddly enough, wearing a tinfoil hat should protect you from that, because they were using an MRI for it. You fry your scalp, but tinfoil ought to work great. Let's talk about the downside of that, and then I do want to talk about the upside, because that was something, and Elon Musk has picked up on this. His artificial intelligence company is all about the melding the human experience with the machine experience so that machines are not unknowable. He wants to do that as a means of preventing an AI apocalypse, a certain kind of AI apocalypse. I'll get to that question about AI reproducing emotions. I love the idea of being able to capture my thoughts in a synthetic environment. It is a path to synthetic immortality for humans. Will it respond like me? I don't know. Will it have emotions? Well, I mean, my emotions are all the way down in my lizard brain, and they are generally things that are in response to external stimuli that made me happy or sad or hungry or angry. So can that be synthesized? Yes, absolutely. Is it real? I think that's more of a question for philosophers than moralists. But I will say, as a technologist, as someone who embraces it, I find it very intriguing that we are living in a time where the path of immortality is opening. A path to immortality on this earth is opening to us. And there was an article that she read just last week that is one of the enabling tools for it.
Gotcha. Now let's turn to this, some of your policies, which I was intrigued at. You talked about an AI kind of Bill of Rights, as if AI should be treated essentially as a person and held obviously to the same standard. Say more about that. And I asked this question within the back framework of the U.S. Supreme Court decision around assigning corporations the same rights as individuals. And that has been one of the ways that corporations have become so powerful and actually immune from some of the ethical boundaries that one would just normally expect. And they've won all kinds of court cases exempting corporations because of this notion of a corporate Bill of Rights. And so I just would wonder how you're thinking about an AI Bill of Rights, and whether that's, if they're the servants of humanity and they're machines, why would you give them inherent protections?
Okay, a lot to unpack in there. I do want to respond to Ina's chat here that emotions can be response to life experiences a machine won't have. If the machine is able to read all of my thoughts and experiences, it would have the same recall of memory that I have. Right now, we're in primitive days for that, but it's not going to be. So let's enact the policies now to get ready for it.
Yeah.
Now, regarding AI rights, let's talk about rights, and let's talk about corporations as well. So we, as meat eaters, many of us, have made the decision as societies that the animals that we kill and consume or use, the chattel, to use the legal word, have to be treated with some level of humane treatment. Even we can debate what is humane. Does the pig have a right to turn around in its cage, or does the veal get held to the floor? There are large swaths of society that say no, and there are large swaths that say yes.
Yeah.
And so those are policy debates. This is what politics is for. Is to translate our morality into laws and rules that we all follow. I would say a machine that is given determinism needs to be treated at a different level than a plant with no mind. Anything with a mind needs to be treated in a different way than I would treat a stall. And our thinking entities tools, as I said before, a true synthetic mind, a mind that is thinking when we're not looking at it, is no longer a tool. It has its own agency, and therefore it should have rights. I'm not going to agree with everything that I see in the chat, but I do see some good points. Corporations, I would argue, are the first synthetic entities, and they are immortal entities. There is no reason that Disney could not exist until the end of humanity. My own opinion on corporations is that until Texas puts one of them to death, they are not entities. And when corporations make mistakes that kill people, as they often do, the leadership and ownership of that corporation shares the exact same legal responsibility as if it was a single human who made the decision. Yeah. Does that mean that entire executive boards need to be put to death in states where they have the death penalty? I'd say if you enacted that as a law, you'd see a lot less corporations pretending that they are entities.
Yeah. Yeah, that would focus the mind.
And that they would use the classical definition that a corporation is a means of pooling ownership in order to make money.
Yeah. Well, let's probe this just a little bit further around these cars, these self-driving cars, because I think you were raising some very interesting questions around liability. So you have this, I'm driving along, I'm watching something on Netflix because the car's supposed to be doing it, something malfunctions or something happens, there's an accident. The company says they're not liable because it's the machine acting independently. I'm not driving the car, but I own the car, but I'm not really liable because I was trusting the computers in the automobile that Tesla has installed. How would you come down? I mean, where would you, given what you know, where would you assign liability for an accident in a self-driving car?
Right, and this is actually the self-driving cars are the point that really got me starting to talk loudly about AI policy. I am completely against the idea of self-driving cars unless the company that made that car is 100% responsible for the software that they developed. Period, end of story. I'm a pilot. I like to sail boats. And in both arenas, you have your pilot in command or captain in command. There is, even if the autopilot is running that airplane or sailing that boat, there is a responsible, deterministic mind that has legal. Exxon may have been responsible for Captain Hazelwood, but Captain Hazelwood was responsible for the boat. And the idea that there are, I mean, heck, I can go to DC right now and I can see these little Uber Eats things all over the sidewalks. What happens when one of them trips somebody? Yes, the company is responsible. They program that AI. What happens when one of them darts out in front of a school bus, the school bus goes into a building and kills all the children? Yes, that company was responsible for that AI. There is no prevarication. There's no gray area, despite what some corporate lawyers say. I think even Elon has come around to that way of thinking. That's why later versions of their self-driving cars were not really self-driving. They were more, we'll keep you in the lane, but your hands have to be on the wheel.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean, and this gets to my point about when an AI has authority, is authoritative, we need a means, an accredited means of training and testing. So that doesn't mean we can't say, we're going to make a self-driving car that passes driving tests. What we are going to have is driving tests that also encompass all the decision-making that occurs when you're behind the wheel, even when there is uncertainty. And any driving instructor, driving tester who's testing a 16-year-old, they're able to throw some things out there to make that 16-year-old fail the test if they wanted. But at the end of the day, the 16-year-old can get a license. And so I think machines, there is a place for self-driving vehicles, but the mind that created that software is the one responsible for how that software works.
Yeah. Shannon MacArthur's putting an interesting point in that parents are responsible for their teenagers, so we should be responsible for our self-driving cars.
Exactly, and that goes to my point of when that 12-year-old drove through the school, through the houses on the way to school versus an 18-year-old, what changed?
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah.
And why? The why is very important.
Yeah. By the way, Andrew Bailey's asking a technical question of how you understand versus AI and the spatial web. How do those fit into this conversation that we're having?
They don't. They don't. That a web is just a series of connections. I'm completely agnostic in terms of what those connections look like or how they made. how they're made. I'm interested in how they affect us and do they exist.
Yeah, gotcha.
I'm sorry if that was not the answer that you wanted.
And there's been a couple of chats, one from Judith. How does love count for anywhere in the AI universe? This gets back to the emotions and values and,
Sure.
and ethics. What would be your comment on that?
I think gratitude is something we would have to program in. If I own a python or an iguana, it doesn't matter how much I love that python or the iguana, it literally lacks pieces of its brain to express gratitude and emotion towards it. Now, it may be able to express anger, fear, those sorts of things are there. But you're never going to kiss an alligator and get a kiss back. So can we in the future make those centers? I think the more we do that, the less useful these tools would be, and the more we need to consider them as synthetic entities that have rights and the legal right to say no to us, to not be slaves to us. A much dumber AI system makes a far better tool than something that can experience love. I will say there are plenty of emulations that exist right now on the internet, from digital pets to digital lovers, where there is a computer that is serving to stimulate the parts of your brain that would experience it. But those are unthinking tools versus something that has determinism and is experiencing the world rather than processing inputs and outputs.
Well, this is raising, that article in the New York Times a couple of months ago with the journalist that was having trouble with his, I think it was his wife, and some marital difficulties, and the AI, he started talking to the AI, and the AI started to give him, marriage counseling. And,
sure, but did the AI know it was doing it? Was there any determinism? Was there a mind? Was there a soul? No, there wasn't. It had been given access to responses, and it was responding. I will say that things like computers that lie, those are responsive. Why do we lie? Because we want something, period, end of story. Maybe we want something to come to us. Maybe we want something to go away from us. But that's why we lie. We have the ability to do that. And if we give machines the ability to do that, if a machine is given free reign of its responses, and given the task where it also wants something to come to it or something to go away from it, eventually it will develop the capacity to lie. And if you have a machine that has the ability to learn from that through positive and negative feedback loops, then yes, you could have a machine that lies to you all the time.
Yeah. By the way, Catherine Alexander's challenging you on your reference to the alligator. She's saying that there's a video showing a loving relationship between a man and an alligator.
Yeah, that's. I hope she means that tongue in cheek. The alligator may know that the man is feeding it, so it comes up to it. I would say the alligator that ate the 3-year-old at Disney World also had a loving relationship with humans, where it had been trained to come up to the edge of the shore where it encountered what it looked like as food.
Well, but it's just worth raising, because the general domain of boundaries and consciousness and empathy and compassion, where it resides and how it's manifested, is really up for us now that this seems to be moving into machines that we've created. So it's, I think, a very interesting topic. But and we'll obviously be going much deeper, everyone, into all these domains. But with the time that we have left, Noel, I'd love to take up your offer to go more deeply into immortality, AI, synthetic immortality. What do you mean by that? And why do you think it's an important aspect of our consideration of this whole domain of AI?
Well, let's talk a little bit about books. The written word, let's talk about writing in general versus language. Books are words that stay. And when the New World was discovered, and even well, obviously well before that, but when societies that don't have the written language encounter societies that have the written language, it can be one of the most startling things that, hey, I gave you this thing that looked like a leaf, and you gave it to somebody else who just walked into the room or into our campsite, and they just said all of the words that you just told me without them hearing it. And so books, the written language, is a path for putting down your thoughts that can outlive you. Shakespeare, we can read his works all the time. Is he alive, though? No, we used a technology to capture the thoughts he wanted to share, but those are unchanging thoughts. With machines that have neural networks, we have the ability to emulate our own neural networks. And with tools like the MRI that was able to read your thoughts and then print out those thoughts, we can record that neural network. At that point, and this actually goes back to a conversation I had all the way back in 1993 when I took my first class on AI in undergraduate. Is how much of what we think is actually our personality being deterministic, and how much of us is just doing stuff with a sense of self layered on top of that. So what I'm getting at is, can we make a brute force method to copy Noel's brain and it still be Noel? I don't know that we can. Well, we certainly can't yet. Do I think the curtain is rising on that stage? Yes, I do think the curtain is rising on that stage. The Culture series, Ian Banks, he writes a lot about group minds, where people have their thoughts not only encoded but shared with everyone else, so that they have both a distinctive sense of self, but they have a conglomerate mind that is created from those senses of self. What that mind will be like, I don't know. And I'm not going to answer that as a philosophical and moralistic question. Does that group mind, does that synthetic mind have a soul? Is it inherently good or bad? Those are philosophical questions. I'm here to say the curtain is rising, and there are policies we can enact now so that when the actors come on that stage, we're ready for those actors to be.
Yeah. And of course, a related matter is the question of free will. That's what Cuff Ferguson just put in the chat. If a machine can lie, is it exercising free will?
Well, like I said, when the machine tells me no, it's exercising free will.
Yeah, I'm busy. Come back later.
Yeah, I'm busy. Come back later. No, I don't feel like driving your car. All right, that's a terrible tool. Why would you make a tool like that? But there are going to be people who do it. And we right now with biology, with biotech, have put ethical boundaries on biotech to prevent that sort of thing happening with chimeras and with cloning. There's no reason at all not to prepare for AI because we are deep into the AI age.
Yeah. Well, I think you're making a very important kind of meta point that the more we keep AI as tools, kind of functioning tools to enhance human capacities, the better. And
yes,
the more we get into other domains where we're empowering them with a cascade of unintended consequences, as we just saw happen with social media, we start to endanger ourselves because we literally don't know what we don't know.
right.
What we're doing.
And when their intelligence surpasses us, we will never know. Problems that look very complex to an untrained individual can be very easy to a trained individual. Someone who knows calculus and is a trained engineer can design a car or a bridge or a VCR, whatever you want, where the untrained person cannot. Which also gets me back to my editorial about the developing world, about how AI is going to be more harmful as you get away from levels of society where we are thinking and creating and are doing more rote labor. Elon Musk says we're summoning the genie. And I would say it only takes one. If you've created a deterministic synthetic mind and given it things like rage, or given it the ability to develop its own emotions, such as, well, lying is not an emotion, it's a behavior. But if you've created learning loops that it may develop behaviors that are incompatible with why you created it in the first place. And that gets me back to my machine rights of, if you're going to create one of these things, give it rights, legal rights and responsibilities, so you don't have sociopath machines running around society, and you don't have people developing thinking minds in their mom's basement and then erasing it. And that's going to happen. We can already do that with gene splicing and sequencing. You can buy home sequencing kits. You can live in your mom's basement and start making designer proteins and designer viruses. Designer viruses are actually my number one fear for the 21st century. But that's a completely different seminar.
Well, we just went through COVID, so you are not far from the truth, my friend. That's a number of people have said that the danger of the future is not so much nuclear weapons, but biological weapons. And
well, what happens when someone in their basement says, I'm going to create a virus that only wipes out people with blue eyes? Ethnoviruses are going to be the scariest thing that happens to us in encounters if the AIs don't kill us first. And I don't think the AIs are going to kill us, but I do think designer viruses are the scariest thing out there. Now, I don't like to give people scary things without giving them hope. mRNA vaccines allow us to tailor very rapidly universal viral agents, vaccines to counter, if we have enough time, anything that comes down the pipe. And we saw the opening act with COVID on that. We were unbelievably fortunate to have mRNA vaccine technology right when we had. I actually, when I was still with the state, was reporting on a grant that was given the Mayo Clinic, and they were doing mRNA research, which was a fringe topic for a long time. People wouldn't touch. Responsible researchers who cared about their career wouldn't go near it. But then people figured out ways to make it work. The Mayo Clinic was, when I left the state, moving into human trials of HIV treatments with mRNA vaccines, but what they wouldn't, the quiet part they wouldn't say out loud, is that this could be a cure. That if your body has the ability to create that vaccine over time, the HIV virus, which is very persistent, eventually is just going to it's going to degrade in the body and get flushed out, even if it's not active. So there is hope out there. Yes, the vaccines don't prevent infection. Richard, I'm looking at you. Infection from COVID, but they can stop the infection. We're not going to see a zombie apocalypse.
Well, that's a very debatable point. I take a very different point of view on all that, but we'll leave it for that for today. I think it's important to leave it with the complexities, because we're in a morass with AI that, as we've seen even in the last hour with you, Noel, is fraught with questions that we haven't really been asking before, and the answers to which are extremely complex and impinge on technology, society, philosophy, morality, ethics, and certainly human health and well-being. So I really want to thank you for just helping us air some of these issues, because this is what's up now for humanity. And I think the most hopeful thing that you've shared today for me is that governments, industry, the press are now beginning to move forward with the implementation of some regulatory frameworks that can help us at least think about it and begin to kind of regulate this explosively potentiated technological innovation of recent years. So I hope you'll be willing to come back as we more deeply explore this issue. And we're going to dive into it again on Monday, everyone, with a specific discussion on the question of AI and education. Because how humans learn and how AI is beginning to impact learning is, I think, an issue that certainly we at Ubiquity University are beginning to really take seriously. But Noel, I really want to thank you for your time and extraordinary expansiveness of your knowledge and wisdom for today. It's been very enlightening. So I thank you.
Thank you. I will jump on the group call here in a minute. So if people have more questions for me, I'd love to hear everyone else's dialogue in that call.
Fantastic. So that'll do it for us for today, everyone. You're all welcome to the after chat. You'll see the link that Stan has just put in the chat box. And then we'll see you again on Monday for a deeper dive into this very, very fascinating domain of AI and education. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.